Hi everyone, my name is Alana Weber and I have Maria here from English for Canada. Welcome to our first episode of our new podcast, West Coast to East Coast. This is so exciting. This is our first brand new episode, and myself and Maria, we decided to launch this podcast to talk about immigration updates because I'm an immigration consultant and talk about how you can improve your English or French. And Maria here, she is the owner of English for Canada School. So this podcast is for immigrants in Canada, and we hope that we will deliver some good information for you so it can help you in your immigration journey. Okay, Maria, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. Hi, Olena's community. I'm so excited to be here with all of you. My name is Maria. I am an ESL professional. I have been working in the field for over 15 years now. I am an IELTS, CELPIP, and PTE Pro. You can see me helping a lot of hopeful immigrants just like you from all over the world to help you really pass your test and to also help you improve your English. Now, I am the founder and CEO of English for Canada. Now, the reason why I started this school over 10 years ago is because I noticed the need for personalized and professional support to really help you understand how to pass your English proficiency test. And we very recently also expanded to French now because we understand the need to help you see other options and alternatives for you to help you get your Canadian permanent residency. We also offer general English and French lessons because we really want you to help gain your confidence as you settle into life in Canada, because it's not just about passing your language proficiency test, it's also about being able to communicate effectively as you live in Canada.
That's great, Maria. Thank you so much. And I'm going to introduce myself. My name is Olena Weber. I'm a licensed immigration consultant, and our firm is Weber Immigration, and we do help immigrants with their documentation, and we help them to transition to primary residency in Canada. So, as we mentioned, we decided to start this podcast just to have some talk about immigration news, updates, and generally like just the immigration situation in Canada, because recently it's been pretty crazy. So let's
Yeah.
start with just recapping what has been happening in the world of immigration in the last couple of months. So as I'm an immigration consultant, I'll tell you a little bit of how immigration looks like now. And if you are in Canada, or maybe you're outside of Canada and you would like to come to Canada as a permanent resident, you can really understand what changes there, like, and what the climate kind of is. So in the last, I would say, year, but more so 6 months, we've had like so many different things happening and so many changes. We've
Yeah.
had a new minister of immigration coming, and he's Mr. Miller is just a very serious guy. He does a lot of changes that are very unpopular, I would say, among immigrants. So some of the biggest changes were limiting number of international students coming to Canada. That's one of the biggest changes that happened, which
Hmm.
essentially is limiting number of people that are coming to Canada on temporary residence, right? Like not permanent, but temporary residence. So that's number one. And the second big change that happened is that Canadian immigration system is pretty much it has pretty much transitioned to occupation-based immigration. What that
Right.
means is that your job now defines what chances do you have immigrating to Canada, which it's kind of unheard of. We're all
Hmm.
not used to it, and now it's a bit crazy. And even as immigration consultant, I do feel a little bit like ridiculous, and I think it's absurd for me to like say in my consultations is like, hey, you're working in bank, but if you become a welder, then you will have much better chances immigrating. Like, I feel like I'm crazy, like offering these options, but that's how it is now. Like, that's how immigration looks like now. And yeah, so everybody's looking into like either changing careers or just simply increasing their points for express entry, which is the immigration system that most of immigrants use to apply for permanent residency. And yeah, like it's just been absolutely crazy. I think everybody is adjusting to these changes. And yeah, like it's, immigrants now really need to consider changing their occupations, which is really difficult. Like, I'm sure, Maria, you can relate, like, because by the end of the day, immigrants are people who living their normal lives, right? And
Yeah.
if you are owner of business English for Canada, and like tomorrow I tell you, you know what, Maria, in order to stay living where you're living, you need to become, like whatever, PSW in a retirement home. Like, that's just like
Yeah.
crazy. You would be like, what?
So just
yeah.
for my community, because I know that a lot of people that follow our stuff here, they are, focused on learning English, and they might not be following, immigration updates every single day. What are some of the most popular careers that the Canadian government is looking for? And maybe, I know it's based by province, but what are the most in demand careers that you see the Canadian government is asking for right now for immigration?
Yes. So basically, how it works is that there is a grant, like federal system, which really defines like those strategic sectors of careers. And there are provinces that they also adhere, so they also follow those like strategic sectors, but like they may add up like a couple of extra occupations or industries. So the big picture is that the government is really heavily prioritizing, provincial and federal, everybody's heavily prioritizing health occupations.
Health.
Yeah, so health, like obviously doctors, dentists, but also health
Mhm.
occupations in terms of technical health occupations. So PSWs, personal support workers in retirement home, for example, or other like establishments. Then, of course, nurses, nurse aides, pharmacist assistants. So there are a lot of health occupations they're prioritizing. Then the second one would be trades, and that's true for every like province. Is just countrywide. Trades, which means essentially construction jobs. It means industrial trades occupations, electricians, and sometimes it's just as simple occupations as just painter, right? Like painter,
Yeah.
painters are heavily prioritized. And then so health, trades. Then we have STEM, which is IT and engineers. So that's a third one. And so those three are really, really big. So engineers, IT, trades, health. Then the smaller ones would be like transportation, so truck drivers, and then a little bit of agriculture. So, for example, farm supervisors. Those are like to lesser extent, but still prioritized. And then the big, 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 big giant priority is not occupation based, but it's French speakers. So French
Right.
speakers are being like heavily prioritized right now. Now that's like basically government countrywide strategy. So those again, like trades, health, engineers, IT people. But provinces, they often like add just little sprinkles of like occupation. So for example, in BC, they do at ECEs, so early childhood educators. In
Mhm.
Alberta, they do hospitality, because Alberta has a big hospitality sector, like with Canmore, Banff, right? So they
Right.
want hospitality workers. So it can be different, but like generally, if you are going to find a career in like health or trades right now, doesn't matter which province you're at, you will be prioritized for sure. Yeah.
And the crazy thing is, like, those types of careers, they're not something that you can just learn how to do overnight. You still have to get education to qualify. I mean, if I were to just suddenly become a nurse or something, I would still have to get higher education to do that. I mean, I shudder at the thought of just looking at a needle. It's not for everybody.
It's
I
not
could not
fair.
work in health.
Exactly, but some of them don't require education. So just
Okay.
a very simple example is that, so for example, as I said, like IT, health, trades, right? But I trades are the most prioritized. Health is like
Right.
second, and third would be IT. And then so I had like a real life consultation when it was a 22-year-old guy who works in IT, and because IT is a lower in like priorities of the government, I told him that, like, honestly, like, you are literally better off right now, like at 22 years old, just like taking a break from your IT job and going and being a painter and just paint houses in Toronto for a year. And that will
Wow.
virtually, like, give you a 99.99% chance to apply for PR.
And that's
Um,
so wild because like a few years ago, IT was so booming.
It's wild. Like, it's wild. Yes, and that's another thing is that, like, one of my clients recently said to me that, I'm trying to apply for trades jobs in Ontario, but because, everybody wants trades jobs in Ontario right now, it's actually becoming harder to find. So
Wow.
it is like the shift is happening. So basically, the government, wants that shift. So more people go into trades, for example, right? So it is happening, but I think government underestimate the motivation of immigrants when they're like, sure, I'll become a welder, and everybody just goes and starts like applying for those jobs, and they start filling those jobs. So what I'm afraid of that's going to happen is that next year, because the government said that every year they're going to change their occupation list. So what I'm afraid is going to happen is that next year they review the numbers and they're like, okay, we got enough of tradespeople, now let's move on to like financial sector. And then everybody's like,
And then
all
everyone's
right,
gonna just
now, yeah.
jump the ship.
I know, but
Oh,
it's just a bit chaotic, I would say. But I mean, it has a
yeah.
logic behind it. Of course, there is a logic. Of
Yeah.
course, there is need for those professionals, especially in health, right, and trades, like, all of those. But I don't know. It's a bit chaotic. Another thing is that for people, so let's talk about people who are not in those occupations, because then you're in trouble, right? So if you are not in like health trades or IT, like, what kind of choices do you have? And
Mhm.
number one thing is that just like a basic requirement that I would tell you right away in a consultation is you have to increase your English and or French. If you do have
Yes.
at least a little bit of French, you have to, because at this point of immigration is becoming so difficult right now that increasing your English is just, it's not something extra that you're doing. It's a necessary step that has to happen. You have to maximize your English results. Maria, do you see shift in your like demand? Like, do you see like more people start inquiring about like increasing their CLB?
Yes, compared to during the pandemic when the points were a lot lower. Remember when they had that really random 75-point draw and when the points were averaging around like 300 points, people could usually get called with a lower band score. People were still, of course, studying avidly because they still had to get at least a CLB 7, CLB 8, CLB 9. So, just in terms to could give those of you who are listening an idea as to what those CLB stand for in terms of equivalency for your proficiency. A CLB, the CLB means Canadian Language Benchmark. A CLB 7 is equivalent to an intermediate level proficiency. And then when we head up to CLB 9, which is what maybe many of you are looking for, that is equivalent to the higher end of an upper intermediate proficiency level, but I always say it's leaning more towards C1 advanced proficiency level. So C2 is native speaker level. So in your first language, so whether you speak Portuguese, Spanish, or whatever your first language is, you are a C2 language proficiency level, native speaker. So C1 is the proficiency level below that. A CLB9 proficiency level is quite high. So to get a CLB9, it does require practice and training. Now, the reason why Elena says that it really helps is because it gets you almost up to an extra 60 points for your CRS profile, right, Elena, you mentioned?
Yeah, so what we see basically is that most of at least my clients, they do struggle. Like usually they have CLB 8,
Yeah,
and I always would say like you have to like try your absolute best to get to CLB 9,
exactly.
and usually that's the most classic example, because from CLB 8 to CLB 9 can be like a 60 points. So we have
Exactly.
like a literally example right now. We have a client, like we're doing his express entry profile today, and he almost scored CLB 9, but because he scored a little bit less, so he scored CLB 8 in writing. So his score right now is 424 in express entry.
Exactly.
If his writing was CLB 9, so just
9 on
that
the CELPIP.
writing, it would be 480 plus, so
Yeah,
487 or
so
something.
a couple of years ago, when the points were, a lot less, that would have been okay. So he would have been, that would have been reasonable. And a
Yeah.
lot of our students were happy with getting a CLB 7 or a CLB 8, and they were still studying, and, those points were still very reasonable. And they were getting invited for the express entry program, or they were, waiting to get the TR to PR, and they were just waiting in the pool to get invited. But now, with the points being 535 for the general express entry program, they need to really get those extra 60 points, so that, really getting that CLB 9 on their English proficiency test, whether it's the IELTS or the CELPIP. And now there's also the PTE available, which we'll be talking about in our later episodes. They really have to prove that they can get that upper level proficiency, that CLB 9, to get those extra points.
Yes, and I think it's just like really changed the necessity for that, for retaking your like IELTS or CELPIP, because as I said, is that when previously I was saying that I would recommend retake your English so you can improve your score, and the response from the client would be like, oh, I really don't want to, but yes, if I have to I will, but I don't know if I can. Then now the mindset shifted a bit, because now people understand how difficult it is to get that invitation to apply for PR. And then it's not a matter whether you want it or not. It's a matter of necessity. Like if you don't get your English score to your highest possible level, and of course everybody should aim for CLB 9, but for some people their highest level from where they are right now, it would be CLB 7, right? It's
Right.
your personal best, right? What I'm talking about, your personal best, what you can personally achieve to the best of your ability in the short term, like in the next year, for example, right? And
Right.
it's a true necessity right now. And if you don't feel like you want to retake your English, then probably chances of you being invited through express entry are fairly slim, unless you are in trades, health, or IT STEM sectors. So that's why like it's becoming an actual what's the word for it, like item on your to-do list, like not whether or if, but like it has to happen. Like you have to retain that class. And then after retaking the test, after hopefully scoring your personal best in your English exam, after that, then we will still have to think how to get you to the point of getting an invitation to apply. Only retaking English doesn't cut it nowadays. It's just one first step to getting closer to that 500 mark, right? So
Exactly.
yeah, that's unfortunately, but that's what's happening right now. Yeah. And then another thing, especially for those who are not in those sectors, right? And then I'm just looking through my notes. So
Elena, do you think that there's any, you can't make predictions, but do you foresee any chances of the points dropping? You can't really make predictions, right?
no, I can go right now and I can tell you it's a math game, right? So it depends on how many people they're going to invite. But I can tell you right now that generally speaking, they invite 1 second. I can tell you right now because I'm on government webpage. And so, for example, in the last several general draws, so not those like French-speaking draws or the trades draws, but general draws when people that are not in demand occupations, they qualify for those draws. They invited 1,500 people per draw, right? So 1,500 people at a time. So to give you an idea what that means, so right now there are more than 10,000 people in Express Entry pool as of right now, more than 10,000 that have 500 plus points.
Wow. So there's still there's still quite a few people who qualify waiting to be called.
The likelihood, exactly. So the likelihood of points dropping below than 500 is pretty low. So basically, and people are adding to the pool because there are people who are like immigrants, right? They are being proactive. They are retaking their IELTS and CELPIP. They are, doing all the necessary steps to increase the points. So right now there are 10,000 people who have 500 plus points, and then there are that number increases, right? But they keep drawing once a month, 1,500 people, right? Once a month, 1,500 people. So basically, it's just not going to happen. The points are not going to go down below 500 unless immigration minister changes the policy, like the direction or strategy, which is not looking like they're going to change the strategy. Like it looks like we're going to, that's where we're at, and it's going to be a new reality, is that in order to get invitation to apply, you need to have 500 plus. Right now, as of today, it's like 520 plus. I hope it's going to be like 510, so just a little bit less. And it's just crazy. But as I said, most of people would really, really, really benefit from just going from CLB 8 to CLB 9. Like that, in writing in IELTS, that would be like writing 6.5 to writing 7, right? Yeah, for example, right?
And then CELPIP would be from an 8 to a 9.
Yes, exactly. And so my question to you, Maria, because I literally answer this question every day during consultation, I still don't know the answer to that. So how long does it take to go from CLB 8 to CLB 9?
This will depend on a few factors. When I talk to our students and people who contact us, I ask them I have to do an assessment of their current proficiency level. If they're currently scoring a CLB 8, I like to look at their writing, because what happens when you take the CELPIP or the IELTS is the examiners have a set of assessment criteria. So they are literally looking at your writing or your speaking responses through a lens. And this lens, think of it like a pie, and then divide the pie in half. Okay. So I'm trying to make this very visual and very easy to understand, especially for people who might be listening and not watching on YouTube. Now, half of this pie is about assessing your actual English proficiency. Now, within that half, there is your grammar, range, and accuracy. So this includes your actual grammar, like pronouns and all those kinds of fun things like complexity and how you actually respond to the, actually sentence structures and everything like that. Articles, all the fun things that you and I don't like talking about all the time. Articles are your favorite, right?
Yeah.
And then there's vocabulary range and accuracy. And then there's pronunciation for the speaking. So that's actual English. Then there's the other half. And then the other half of the pie test strategies, actual test strategies. So in order to score a CLB 9, you have to understand the entire picture, the entire pie. And what happens is a lot of students, even native speakers, go to the test without understanding the full picture, because you can speak perfect English but not understand the test strategies. Or you can fully understand the test strategies but still be making a lot of English mistakes. So we really have to improve both sides of the pie. So when our students come to us, we take a look at their current essays or we listen to their current speaking responses and we assess, okay, what needs to be improved here? Is it grammar? Is it vocabulary? Is it their pronunciation? Is it their test strategies? And usually it's a combination of the two. And we do a personalized assessment. So it's hard to say how long, but usually if they are at a CLB 8, I say about 3 months as a healthy amount.
Yeah.
If they are studying consistently, we have a package of 12 hours. And usually within 12 hours of studying with us, we help them. We do 6 hours of writing, 4 speaking classes. And if they want to do 1 hour of listening, 1 hour of reading, we do that. But we usually divide it 6 hours of writing, 6 hours of speaking. And with us, within those 12 hours, we boost them to a CLB 9. That's what our plan is. We teach them in 6 hours, step by step, how to boost their writing from an 8 to a 9. And in 6 hours of speaking, usually less, we get them up to a CLB 9. Most students usually actually do within the 12 hours. We usually spend more time on the writing and do a couple of classes on the speaking. Our classes are personalized. So the cool thing about it is we tailor our packages to the students' needs. So it's like a personal trainer, right? We can design the classes according to what they need. But I would say 3 months, plan for that so that you're not feeling rushed. Because the worst thing you want to do is to study for 2 weeks. It's really hard to just do it in 2 weeks. I have had students, I will say, do it in a month. Mm-hmm. So I'm just giving like a general answer. Yeah. But we have had students come to us and in 1 month go from CLB 8 to CLB 9. It has happened. So it's really a individual case-by-case situation. I'm giving a longer answer, but I have seen cases where students come to us and in 6 hours of studying with us boost their response.
That's really good. Yeah, that's really good. Like, it's not too bad. Like, it's 1, 2, like even up to 3 months, you can really do it. And that has a very significant impact on your immigration. Like, that's, that's absolutely worth it. On another note, on the same note, but kind of putting it in a perspective, what else people can do to increase their points. So a lot of times what I see is that the logic is that, okay, I can get like up to 60 points by going from CLB 8 to CLB 9, or I can just ask my employer for LMIA, which is like for support, right? For labor market impact assessment. And to me, and of course, every situation is different, but to me, honestly, that logic is not understandable, because I would prefer of like doing things on my own and being fully independent than asking my employer, like asking for a favor. First of all, like we all have to be clear here that when employer is doing LMIA for you, there are technically no strings attached, but there are strings attached usually in a sense of that understanding that employer is doing the favor. So employer kind of understands that you would be working there until you get a PR, and that can be 6 months, that can be 1 year, right? And you cannot leave unless you're willing to lose those 50 points, right? And so there is a lot of like mental game kind of thing going on with that. And I feel like it's just so like I would never want to be, like in a little
Put your
employment
future
jail.
in.
Yeah, a little employment jail. When I can just do by myself the increase of the points, I can do it by myself, right? So, of course, like the likelihood with the situation right now is that you probably maybe need to do both and increase CLB to
Mhm.
CLB 9 and ask your employer for LMIA. That's kind of what's happening. But
Mhm.
if your points are good enough that you can pick one or another, like I would always go for like just study 1, 2, 3 months, right? Like actually
Yeah.
prepare for the test, increase your points rather than like waiting for the employer to do the LMIA process and then afterwards being tied to that employment and like just go through all the things. And of course, I don't want to talk about bad employers, but there are a lot of like abuse at the workplace happening when the employers abuse immigrants and all of that. So I would never want to put anybody in that situation. That's why I always say that the first step is your English. That's the first step.
Yeah.
And then everything else is after, like LMIAs,
Right.
PNPs, everything else, like all the other options are after. Because first, I want to make sure that you, as an immigrant, as somebody who wants to secure permanent residency, you got your personal best. Like, okay, this result for CELPIP or IELTS or PTE is my best. That's it. That's my best for like this year or whatever short
Yeah.
term. And we can go then from that point in terms
And
of
it's also
immigration.
helpful to study for your English proficiency test just for everyday life as well, because as a result, your confidence will improve as you go about in everyday life at work or at home as well. Your English is just going to be a lot better if you're forcing yourself to study. It's just going to be better at work in general.
Exactly. And, by the end of the day, education, like English is not only for your immigration, as you said, right? Like
Yeah.
it's your education and it will eventually also result in your career development. You probably will be able to secure better jobs in Canada. You will be able to perform better during interviews. And it's not only for your immigration. So absolutely that has to be like step one for anybody. And then, yeah,
Mhm.
step two, in terms of planning immigration or like dealing with current situation when we have high points would be to consider support of employer for either LMIA or provincial nomination. And another thing, what people that are not in those in-demand jobs, what they can do is think about changing the province, because as I said, like generally, yes, all the provinces are targeting those occupations like trades, IT, STEM, and health. However, some provinces also have like selected occupations that they're targeting. So, for example, if you're a cook in Ontario, then you need to figure out how to reach 520 plus points. If you're a cook in Alberta, then you will have much more opportunities in terms of provincial programs, even though I don't work with other provinces other than like Ontario, but I just know it from general knowledge. And that you may need to consider like moving to other provinces or changing job to in-demand occupation, and like figure things out that way, because yeah, like it's just becoming crazy. But that's kind of nowadays what people have to consider.
Could
And
those
another
moves be
thing.
temporary? Like
Sorry.
if somebody were to move to another province, could that be a temporary thing? Like if somebody were to really want a PR for their
Well,
family,
it's
could they go to Alberta temporarily until they get their PR, and then do they have to stay there forever, or could they go back to their province of choice after?
okay, so that's a good question, because technically the answer is like no. Like
Oh wow.
it's a gray area. Why? Because we have in Canada Charter of Rights. So in Charter of Rights, there is a very basic right of every person is right of mobility, right?
Right.
So we cannot say to permanent residents of
You
Canada
can't
that you cannot
leave.
move, right? Yeah, like you can live wherever you want. You're a permanent resident, right? However, in terms of benefiting in terms of your immigration status and qualifying for it. If, for example, Alberta or any other province, you go there, you have to prove intention to reside in that province. So when you're applying for that program, so let's say you're a cook in Ontario, there is now a new program in Alberta for cooks. Let's say you go, you work as a cook in Alberta, you get your employer to support your PNP application. As a part of that PNP application, you'll have to prove your intention to reside in Alberta. So let's say, you come up with a proof, you paint the pretty picture that, yes, I really want to reside in Alberta. You get a PR. So that process takes a while, right? Like that may take like a year. So for a year, 2 years, you will definitely have to live there. Then you get a PR. When you get a PR, technically, you can go anywhere in Canada. You can move as a permanent resident. However, you probably eventually will want to apply for citizenship. When on citizenship application, they will see, so immigration officials will see that the next day you got your PR in Alberta, you just moved right back to Ontario, then citizenship officer will have a question about that. Now, even though it's allowed to do that, because they cannot prevent you of like moving, but they would ask you for a proof, like, okay, show us that your intention was true, right? Like that you tried to stay in Alberta. That did you apply for jobs in Alberta? Did you they will ask again for proof. So you can get in trouble by doing that. Yeah. And but Alberta, or BC, Alberta, those like really nice provinces to live in. Like it's not like you're moving to Nunavut. Like Nunavut is, I mean, like let's be honest here.
No offense to anybody in Nunavut, if you have any followers. Sorry, guys.
Sorry, but like let's be honest, like it's a pretty difficult situation. But it's nice, those nice provinces, and the same like any really other provinces are pretty nice, except those ones that are like like I have one client who moved Northwest Territories. And he's like, I work in a store as a supervisor. I'm like, okay, which store? He's like, the store. We have one store.
The one store. The only store.
There is one store, yeah. Like that's it. But yeah, so it's like a department store. It's a pretty big store, and he was a supervisor. But anyways, yeah, so you most likely would have to kind of have a true intention, of course, living in those provinces. But that's where we're at in terms of immigration. You have to definitely, the baseline is like working your English, then you have to consider changing your career or changing your province, or both. And then the fourth one is consider whether you are able to put effort into learning French, and that way that can benefit your immigration. Because the last French draw, I have a page open here, so the last French draw that we had was 336 points. And one thing that we forget here in Canada is that those 336 points, that's not just people in Canada who speak French, like immigrants who are here. That's people like all over the world. So if, I don't know, maybe somebody listens to this, and if you are outside of Canada and you have a little bit of French, or like you have big desire to increase your French, or maybe you're already a native speaker, then applying for immigration is the best thing that you can do this year, because those 336 points, that's people all over the world. So imagine Cameroon, for example, is a big French-speaking country. A lot of applicants from Cameroon are getting like a chance of their lives right now, because a lot of them, they've never been to Canada. They never visited Canada. They just speak French. They were able, even for them, actually, it's hard to pass French for immigration purposes, even as a native speaker. But they do it, that they study, they do it, and they just get invited for immigration. So, that's pretty wild what's happening right now with French speakers. But if you are considering studying French, then you would need to get your French to CLB seven in
7.
order, to like actually get invited as part of those French draws. Now, Maria, I know you recently guys started teaching.
Yes, I'll pop the link in our chat. There we go. I just popped the link in the chat there. So we have a French Canadian teacher teaching Canadian French. His name is Mark. He is from the province of New Brunswick. Now, fun fact, New Brunswick is the only fully bilingual province of Canada. So Quebec's actually fully French. And he told me this. And I confess that I need to learn French. So I am going to be one of our own students because I'm fully born and raised in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. And for those of you who are in Vancouver, we don't speak a lot of French over here. I learned French.
Sorry, Maria, you're really going to learn French?
I have to learn French.
Why?
I have no choice. Because that's something I need to do. Like, I feel like as a Canadian, I should learn French. Like, I feel like a bad Canadian for not speaking French. I speak Spanish and Portuguese. Like, I should be speaking French.
You already speak like so many languages, like obviously English, Spanish, Portuguese. Those are huge languages. Like you can communicate with literally like 2/3 of the world.
I know, but I'm a Canadian. I feel like I should learn French. And like, so I learned a bit of French when I was growing up because here in Canada in our education system, we learn the basics. So I speak I can understand like very basic French. But I feel like my duty as a Canadian, I should start learning French. So I will be one of our first students here. But Mark is our Canadian teacher here, French Canadian teacher, and we will be teaching TEF preparation classes for your language test and general French classes as well. So he's really excited to meet all of you if you want to get started with our online French classes. Now, a common question that we get is how long does it take to get to a CLB 7? Now, this is really going to depend on your current French proficiency level. If you have 0 French right now, I was doing a little bit of research into this, and I have a couple of answers for you. Now, according to my research here, if you have 0 French and you are an English speaker, for you to get from 0 French up to a CLB 7. Now, what is a CLB 7? Again, the CLB means Canadian Language Benchmark. A CLB 7 is equivalent to an intermediate level proficiency level, leaning more to the upper end of the scale because CLB 5, 6, and 7, all 3 of those CLBs are intermediate proficiency level. So the CLB 7 is the higher end of the 3. According to my research here, it takes about 800 hours for you to get to that level. Now, of course, this is really a general blanket statement. It will also depend on a few other factors. One of them is your age. Of course, as adult learners, we learn slower than children. Your native language will also play a role. English speakers supposedly learn a little bit faster, but I would also say if you speak like a romantic language like Spanish or Portuguese or even Romanian, you might learn a bit faster. Your educational background will also help. So the higher your education, you will learn a bit faster. Your language immersion. So if you live in a part of the country where you're surrounded by people speaking French, you will learn faster. Your time investment. So how much time are you investing in your French study? So how much are you actually studying per day? Maybe 20 to 30 minutes per day would be ideal. How much do you enjoy learning French? So what's your attitude towards learning French? If it's something that you think is boring or you're just not going to do it, same thing like with anything else. If we're planning on exercising or learning how to cook, we have to enjoy what we're doing so that we actually do it. And then having clearly defined goals and learning objectives. And that's where having a teacher will really help you. Because when you create a realistic study plan and you have someone there to help you stay accountable, that's when you really start seeing results. So these are some other factors that will really help you have a guided learning experience to help you achieve that CLB 7. Now, I know 800 hours sounds really overwhelming. I wouldn't think of it in terms of hours. I would think of it maybe over the course of some months. So maybe think of it as 6 months to get started and think of it in a big picture like that, so you don't feel overwhelmed, and start from there. That would be my
Okay,
answer.
yeah, that makes sense. But that being said, like I have to say that I've had French native speakers who have hard time scoring CLB 7. Like I had a couple of clients that couldn't score from the first try CLB 7, and
Mhm.
I have like one guy like he's like fully bilingual, like 100%, and he just like didn't. But the same in English, right? Like I remember a long time ago I talked to a British girl who scored IELTS 5, and I'm like, how do you score IELTS 5? Like you don't know. But it's just like it's a matter of preparation, right?
That's what I was talking about earlier about the pie. It's not just about your English proficiency or your French proficiency. There's also the aspect of the test strategies and understanding how you are going to be assessed by an examiner. Really,
Yes.
50% of your results, 50%, I'm talking seriously, half of your performance is understanding how you are going to be assessed. And a lot of it doesn't have to do with your grammar, your pronunciation, or your vocabulary. It's a lot about test strategies. I can honestly say that I've tested native speakers and heard them and been like, your English is absolutely perfect, but you're not going to get a CLB 9 because you messed up on something that has nothing to do with your English. And I know it sounds so silly, but it's just the way the test has been designed.
Yeah. No, that's crazy. So yeah, in terms of French, I know it's not easy. Do you think, and I don't know if you can answer that, but like through my experiences looking at immigrants' test results, I can say that I can see that scoring CLB 7 in French is harder than scoring CLB 7 in English. Do you think that's a case?
Scoring a CLB 7 in French, scoring a CLB 7 in English. I would have to consult Mark on that because I
Ask
am
him
not a
because
French teacher.
next time we talk next
Yeah.
week, we'll get back to
I
that
I
because
think I think it would be best to bring Mark on as a guest for a future episode to better
we
answer those
should do
questions.
that. Yes.
Yeah, then to me, because I don't speak French and I don't want to give any wrong answers here, and we can save that for a future episode. So let's leave our guests excited for a future episode. We can bring Mark on.
Yeah, that
He
would be
can
great
speak some
idea.
French. He can speak
I
some
do
French
have
for us.
one success story though about French. So I have this one guy who has been consulting with me for immigration, and he's clearly a very very talented individual. Like he's very talented in languages. His English is absolutely like just perfect English, and it's just some people have those like talents, right? And he
Mhm.
started learning French just for fun, even when he like what he's from Ukraine. So even when he was living in Ukraine, he just like started learning French for fun. But then eventually, when he moved to Canada, he understood how important it is for immigration. So he started taking French classes with like an actual TEF instructor. Like I think he does it like 3 or 4 times a week because he wants to really score that CLB 7. And he took his first. So he's been doing French classes for maybe like 6 months or something like that. He took his first TEF exam. He almost scored CLB 7, like almost. And he's like, I'm 100% sure that like I know exactly what I need to work on, and I can score it like by May or whatever. Like I can score it. So I was shocked because it's crazy. Like the guy is and he didn't put like years into studying, but one thing that he does have, he's very passionate about language and he truly loves it, and
Mhm.
he just feels motivated outside of also immigration. Like immigration is a big motivator, of course, for him to invest like monetary into tutoring, but outside of immigration, he just like really enjoys it. He loves it. He likes like he thinks about, oh my gosh, like I would live in Paris. Like he really likes that vibe. So motivation is a very big factor.
Well, I will say that getting a CLB 7 on an English test is not that, like I've seen CLB 7s multiple times. It's not that challenging. A CLB 7, it's like, it's really intermediate proficiency level. you can communicate effectively in the workplace or with your friends. And most people arrive at that level by the time they're in Canada. It's not a really challenging level to get to, especially if you're studying English and you're already here, you're immersed. You can get a CLB 7. It starts to get challenging when you're at the CLB 8. That jump from a CLB 8 to CLB 9 is really where it gets hard. But most people can get to a CLB 7 in English. It's not the end of the world.
Yeah, I agree. I agree for sure because CLB 7, I think like in English, the way I think in like real life, like not, I'm obviously not a teacher, but like literally anybody can reach CLB 5 in English. Like
Yeah.
I'm really sure
That's
that
very pre-intermediate. Yeah. It's intermediate,
yes.
but almost pre-intermediate.
And then CLB 5 to CLB 7, of course, you have to like work on it. And of course, you have to like put an effort. CLB 7 is a very like good, strong level, but still, you know, like you can do it for sure. When in French, I really feel like CLB 7, that's like an actual challenge. So I don't know. That's at least what I've seen through my like practice and talking to people. But we need to bring in more to
Yeah, I think if you because you've seen more of it then I would that's good that you have that experience. Just because I don't speak French personally, I'd rather not give that answer, but Mark will know more on that
yes,
front.
yes.
But definitely on the English front, then I can say that CLB 7 is not that intimidating. So for those of you that are taking the test, don't be scared of a CLB 7. It is funny though, in terms of the scale, like the CEFR scale, the Common European Framework of Reference, and the CLB, they are supposed to be, in terms of proficiency, the same. It's just maybe it doesn't feel like it.
It doesn't. They're supposed to be. So also because it's different tests in a sense of like the structure, right? Like TEF, TCF.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's where we can talk about in a future episode when we talk about the IELTS, the CELPIP, and the PTE. It's not always that the language itself is more challenging. It's the format of the exams that changes so much that can impact your performance. Like
Yes.
one format of the exam can be so different that it makes it so much more challenging that you can, it can impact your results. We'll talk about that in a future episode.
Yes, for sure. Well, thank you so much, Maria. I'm happy that we got to do.
Thank you, Olena, for having me. This was really fun, everybody.
Yeah, it was super fun. And we already laid out several episodes ahead. So the next episode, just to give a little tease, we're going to talk about the big topic of extending your work permit, because as we talked today, it's really hard to get invitation to apply for permanent residence. A lot of people in Canada who are on work permits, they're not able to get their invitations for permanent residence. So they need to think about extension of their work permits or legal status just generally. So we will talk about that. We will cover immigration news, whatever is going to happen between now and the next week. And we will talk about some sneaky ways to extend your work permit. And I will tell you one very, very kind of like hidden program, how to extend your work permit. And Maria already knows kind of what I'm talking about, but it's definitely underrated work permit extension program. So we will talk about this next week. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining.
On my front as well, I'll also be talking about the CLB 5, what goes into a CLB 5 for the speaking and listening, and maybe some tips as well, just so you can see really how easy it is to get a CLB 5 in terms of structure. And I can give you a little bit more of a breakdown of what actually a CLB 5 looks like.
Sounds good. All right. Thank you so much. And then see you
next
everybody.
Week. Bye.